And we're going to go straight into our next conversation. This has been a great tee up to the next roundtable, which is all about cannabis beverages and all of the other yummy things that people are doing with weed. So next, we're going to learn why cannabis drinks are becoming an increasingly popular way to consume and what it means for manufacturers and the rest of the supply chain. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Cynthia Salarizadeh. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. Cynthia is the founder and president of the luxury brand House of Saka, which makes cannabis-infused alcohol-free beverages and CBD-infused beauty products. Cynthia is also the founder of the cannabis industry's newswire and entrepreneur tech suite, AccessWire, and co-founder to Green Market Media, which is currently the most recognized for its cannabis finance news publication, Green Market Report, and its conference series, the Green Market Summit. She is also a co-founder of the network Industry Power Women. Welcome, Cynthia. Next, we have James Rowan, who is the brand director for Hifi Hops, which is an IPA-inspired sparkling beverage made using everything Lagunitas knows about hops. It's infused with THC from the finest sun-grown cannabis, plus hops for a delicious beer-like flavor, but with 0 alcohol, 0 calories, and 0 carbs. It's a delicious fusion of cannabis and craft beer culture. Welcome, James. Next, we have Max Rudsten, the co-founder and chief revenue officer at Filigreen Distribution. Shout out to Filigreen. They've been one of our sponsors here this weekend. We so appreciate your support. Max is an experienced alcohol and cannabis entrepreneur with a passion for building tangible, sustainable businesses. After launching the distilled spirits brand Fernet Francisco in 2013, he dove headfirst into the medical cannabis market, where he created a sizable cultivation portfolio and launched the organic flower brand Family Tree. In 2017, Max and 2 partners founded Filigreen Distribution, a market leader in technology-driven cannabis logistics with a fierce focus on building tools to help brands scale efficiently. Welcome, Max. Next, we have Luke Anderson, who is the co-founder of Cann. Luke is a Stanford and HBS graduate and spent 4 years in the CPG practice at Bain & Company. He co-founded Cann with Jake Bullock in 2018, and the brand is currently #1 in California in the THC-infused beverage category. Luke believes in the potential of microdose beverages to displace unwanted alcohol consumption and is excited to be part of the category's rapid evolution. I have been drinking a lot of canned drinks during this quarantine, and let me tell you, they are super delicious and the perfect size. Super happy to have you here, Luke. Welcome. Finally, this conversation will be moderated by Rebecca Stamey-White, who is a partner and cannabis practice leader at Hinman and Carmichael LLP. Rebecca is an experienced alcohol and cannabis attorney based in San Francisco. Her practice focuses on licensing strategy and legal solutions for compliantly producing, distributing, selling, and marketing these regulated products. And she has a special interest in cannabis beverages, which often cross between her 2 favorite industries. And if you were at Meadowlands last year, you may have done some tie-dyeing with Rebecca and her team in the Redwoods, which was so much fun. So we won't be doing any tie-dyeing today, but I'm really happy to have you all here. Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us on a Zoom call. Rebecca, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. And I am actually quite happy that I'm not doing tie-dye this weekend. That was a lot of work. As a lawyer, I was like, oh, this is really manual labor. This is challenging. But it was really fun. And I felt vindicated for people who were like, who needs bandanas? I was like, I didn't predict COVID, but I hope everyone that has a bandana was able to utilize it during the pandemic and have a little pizzazz to their quarantine gear. So thank you so much for putting this panel together. You know, I think Meadow has been so supportive of this category, and I'm excited for this conversation. And I love the theme of today around hospitality and food and thinking about how we can come together, because I think, you know, one of the things that this panel brings together so greatly is kind of how cannabis can be approachable in product categories that people are already familiar with. So I'm really excited about this panel. The cannabis beverage category has been growing very quickly. Granted, it started very small, so a lot of movement for growth, but it's predicted to be the fastest growing segment of the industry. So I'm really excited about the panel today. We've got some heavy hitters and very experienced folks. We did a prep call a couple days ago and wish we had recorded it. The conversation was flowing so well. So I'm going to kick it off to Cynthia. I'd love to kind of have everyone introduce themselves and how they fit in within the cannabis drinks category, and just talk a little bit about their product and their consumers. So Cynthia, kicking it off to you.
Okay, great. So I started off actually in the beverage category, not necessarily with my own brand. So I did the PR for Ebu, and Ebu actually launched the very first water-soluble THC infusion product called Genesis. Eventually, Ebu was acquired by Cannabis Growth. It was a pretty big deal. But that was how I started out in cannabis, hands-on in the beverage category. But once Prop 64 came along, I knew if I ever personally launched a brand, it would be a cannabis-infused wine, because historically, for thousands of years, that's how it was consumed all throughout different religions, different war rituals. In fact, the name Saka represents a very specific tribe in Central Asia, actually the Scythians. Saka is the Persian term for it, and that's where the mythological Amazonian women came from, so Wonder Women, hence the name of our brand, and we're an all-female owned and operated company. But so House of Saka, when Prop 64 went through, I started getting the brand pulled together. I found an entrepreneur and a very experienced individual within wine, my business partner, Tracy Mason. And to be clear, I could have never brought this brand to life by myself. I don't know anything about winemaking, so I had to find the perfect partner to do that. And we went ahead and we launched House of Saka. And right now we have two products on the market. One is called Saka Pink and one is called Saka White. And we're obviously not allowed to use the terms wine or rosé, but as you can imagine, Saka Pink is our rosé and Saka White is actually our Chardonnay. We're getting ready to launch our single serves in a little bit, Saka Spark. That's our carbonated beverage, and we have some bath salts coming to market, but we are the first and only Napa Valley based cannabis infused beverage on the market, and we're pretty proud of that. You know, pray for Napa. There's a lot of really sad things going on there right now, but other than that, that's House of Saka.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. I'm going to go over to James next, sort of the beer side of the cannabis beverages, or at least closely aligned to a beer company. Can you talk a little bit, James, about your experience in the industry and kind of how this brand came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with Cannacraft in 2016. Cannacraft was founded in Santa Rosa in 2014. So at the time, it was very much the medical market. The brands that they were bringing, Care by Design, Absolute Extracts, Satori chocolates, were all really focused on taking these benefits of the plants and instilling those down and getting them into everyday formats that they could get to this medical market. In about 2016, as we were getting ready for state legalization, obviously we would see our neighbors to the south, Lagunitas Brewing Company, out at events. We're located about 15 miles apart from each other. Very similar ethos of both companies. And we'd see each other at events. And then Jeremy Marshall, who is the brewmaster from Lagunitas, would come up on Thursdays at 4:20 and just hang out with our formulation team, the extraction team, talk terps, talk hops, talk about the cannabis hops relationships, because they are such ancestral cousins, you know, the Cannabis. And the two most common terpenes that you find in hops, myrcene and humulene. Of course, the two of the most common that are in cannabis. And we're just trying to find a way to kind of infuse our two loves, beer and cannabis. So the first iteration of that was the Supercritical Ale. And that was a Lagunitas beer that was infused with cannabis-derived terpenes from the Absolute Extract CO2 supercritical extraction process. That was only on taps. They made a very limited batch of that. And then the TTB said, nah, you're not going to do that. You can't mix those two things. And so we kind of had to go back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, how can we bring in hops and cannabis? And that was how Hifi Hops was born. As some people do think that it is a beer tasting or a non-alc beer, and it's absolutely not. It definitely is a sparkling water that is hop inspired. So it drinks water, it's refreshing, effervescent, has that good carbonation. But how that is made is Lagunitas dry hops their water, much like they would for any of their ales. But nothing is added that the yeast can convert to alcohol. So it really is a dry hopped ale that is perfected at Lagunitas. Then that gets shipped to Santa Rosa, California, to Cannacraft, where we use our nano emulsification to infuse it with THC. And then we bottle that in 3 different ratios. We have the Reverb, which is 10 milligrams of THC, the Tuner, which is 5 milligrams of THC and 5 milligrams of CBD, and then the Unplugged, which is 18 milligrams of CBD and only 1 milligram of THC. So it's been a beautiful relationship. We get to hang out with some really, really awesome people that have a very similar company vibe to Cannacraft and to Absolute Extracts. And we've been rolling ever since.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James. I'd like to head over to Luke now. And, you know, Luke, Cann is a bit different categorically than these other products. Can you tell us a little bit about your positioning and your consumers?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. These are cans. My co-founder Jake and I, we met 7 years ago, very good friends, both consulting classmates working in the consumer packaged goods and retail space. And he grew up in Colorado, was super into cannabis, and knew all about how the industry was evolving and believed, just like Saka and Cannacraft folks spotted well, that beverage, because of the deep human history and socializing around beverage, was the way that this whole industry may evolve over time. I was not a cannabis person until starting the company. I'd actually never been to a dispensary before. My only cannabis experiences were getting too high from a pot brownie in college that I didn't know how many milligrams it was. And I ended up kind of sinking into a couch for a couple of days, or coughing too hard off a joint and feeling like, oh my God, this is impossible for me to deal with. And so, I had long just kind of avoided cannabis and was a pretty heavy drinker. And by the time I turned 30 and my hangover started getting worse, I reached back out to Jake and said, okay, I thought cannabis was just for high THC, more traditional stoner types. But if I'm starting to get curious, then maybe there's room for something that's a super, super micro dose in a beverage that could be an alcohol substitute, something that you could drink instead of alcohol or alongside alcohol, alternating, so that maybe you're limiting your buzz and limiting the harmful effects of that. So we put our heads together and we just made these cute little 2 milligram THC, 4 milligram CBD cans. We sell them primarily in a 6-pack. And early on in the industry, I was on a cannabis beverage panel, and somebody told me, one of the panelists said, people drink cannabis beverages to solve sleep issues, pain issues, and anxiety issues. And anyone who's telling you differently is lying. And I'm delighted to say, after a year of being on the market, it seems like there is really a space for a social use case, something that is just about feeling a little bit of a buzz, taking the edge off, having a good time, but avoiding more harmful substances. And it's taken us a really long time. We almost shut the company down a number of times in our journey, but we started doing things like yelling at people about how to use it or who to use it with on the packaging itself. And we're finding that over time, enough people that buy in multi-packs and share with their friends in the same social settings as beer and wine are consumed, enough people just tend to come back and repurchase it. So it's still super early on. It's very, very difficult to make and very difficult to sell profitably. So I'm excited about this panel and having everybody's thoughts on how the entire industry needs to evolve to support this new category of social beverages that have brands that look like Saka and Hifi hops that you wouldn't be surprised if you found in a Whole Foods someday.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think kind of on that topic, I'd love to hand it over to Max to talk a little bit about, from the distribution side and retail side, why are beverages a little bit more complicated? And tell us a little bit about Filigreen's role, how you choose beverages that you work with.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So my journey started in 2013. I actually started this distilled spirits brand. And so have obviously experienced packaging liquid and trying to spread it to the masses. And in the alcohol business, the distribution side is very antiquated, but it's built to support large, bulky products. Cannabis distribution is a relatively new link in the supply chain, and we're used to distributing, 1 gram sauces that, cost $30. So what we're noticing is that, the supply chain hasn't evolved to a point where beverages can just fluidly, no pun intended, move through the supply chain. So, I have a fierce fascination with supply chain logistics, and my goal in distribution is to try and create this kind of healthy ecosystem so that as products move downstream, they do so in ways that don't add on a lot of cost, so that the consumer can enjoy a cannabis beverage that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So we're not quite there yet. But, for us, it's about building, processes and systems and technology to really support the category. Still have a ways to go, but definitely excited. Filigreen, what we're striving to be is a market leader in tech-driven logistics. So we're a fully licensed distributor and a B2B e-commerce platform. So for us, picking brands, we want to pick best in class ones that taste delicious. And for me, it's beverages is something I'm super fascinated with. I drink literally every beverage on the market, and I'm very excited about where it's going.
Yeah, I feel like during quarantine, that's been one of my, coping mechanisms is getting fun beverages. I've been recently exploring cream soda, random throwbacks, kombucha, whatever. In addition to alcohol and cannabis beverages, I feel like, beverages are fun to mix things up. So I want to talk a little bit about production. Let's kind of, part of what my practice is looking at kind of how to make things easier, more streamlined for, seed to sale. So what are some of the production challenges with cannabis beverages, and kind of where are we now? I'll open that up to everyone.
I would say for Hifi hops, it is such a craft beverage and a craft product. And Lagunitas is responsible for making it, and they can only make it in Petaluma, and then they ship it to Cannacraft where we can infuse it. Making a reliable and consistent product at scale can be an issue, especially when in beverage, the strategy really needs to be moving volume. Like Luke said, they're 6-packs or, the 24 packs, or with Hifi, the 4-packs and the 10 packs. It's the only way that we're going to move enough volume to really make it make sense for our dispensary partners who, as Max indicated, they're used to having $30,000 worth of cannabis product that can fit in the trunk of your car versus $30,000 of our product, which is the size of a shipping container. There's just certain logistical issues for us because everything is made in Santa Rosa, and then we distribute that out to the state of California. So Max indicated the distribution isn't necessarily set up for beverage yet. We know that the beverage industry exists, and so we can take from them, but it's just not there with cannabis. So I would say for us, it is making something that is a craft product reliably. There's plenty of waste, and in that, our margins are relatively slim, but we need to keep the cost to the consumer down so that encourages adoption and it encourages multiple and repeat purchases. And so we'll keep our margins down so that the dispensaries can keep theirs up. So it really definitely is that balance, and then figuring out as we scale up how we bring our COGS down, how we can increase our margin, and continue on, because I definitely we see this beverage category as the way of the future.
James, you guys have a bunch of different SKUs. Can you talk a little bit about that? Your strategy. Are you trying to get the whole suite of beverages in one dispensary, or are you really targeting to different consumers based on what that dispensary's customer base looks like?
A little bit of both. The strategy behind Hifi Hops was having something that was sociable, familiar, and sessionable. Sessionable can mean a lot of different things. For the absolute extract, THC, the reverb is plenty, if not enough. I'm sorry, my earphones are doing a little funkiness. We definitely wanted to introduce things where the consumer felt like they had control. They can make a choice. The ABX consumer, a 10 milligram, if anything, that's too weak. They're asking us for 100 milligrams. And we know that the 100 milligram have traditionally dominated the beverage category. You get more bang for your buck. You make more money off of less. But we are seeing that transition now with Hifi Hops, especially with the introduction of Cann, that people are looking for a lower milligram option. Overall, by volume, the lower milligram single serve bottles dominate the beverage category. And so, yes, our 10 milligram is the top performer, but we're seeing the 5 and 5 really pick up. We're seeing the 18-1 absolutely pick up. And we wanted to make sure that everybody, especially new consumers, have something that they can, have as an introductory product.
Yeah. Cynthia.
I wanted to jump in because there are, with us being such a new category, there are still tremendous obstacles for us overall as far as production and manufacturing is concerned specifically. Even though we've received as a category some of the most investment out there, thanks to Constellation Brands, that was what, $4.5 billion. That's just from them. That's not even counting AB Bev with Tilray or, Molson Coors or anything else, Lagunitas with, Heineken. Whatever the case may be, we're still extremely underdeveloped. Our ecosystem there's really no competition. James is in a good position. He's got Cannacraft he's partnered with, and they're set up specifically to be able to produce their particular SKUs and their products. But for instance, for the, infused wine category, for lack of a better term, so we all understand what we're talking about, we actually use 750 milliliter bottles. This requires a different piece of equipment. There's only one in the state of California right now, just one. And we're expecting people who are familiar with cannabis processes, and maybe there's a few with beverage, to understand how to create everything from sparkling water, microdosed water, to something as delicate and as sensitive as wine. How you handle wine is very, very different from how you maybe would mass produce a different type of beverage. So we have one manufacturer in the entire state of California that's prepared to possibly bottle our product. That can be a little concerning when the whole market uses one manufacturer. We're all fighting for production days, and we've got teams of people that are rushing around now to keep us all so we can get to market. Like James said, the name of the game for our category is going to be volume. We've got to get the product into the hands of our consumers. We're taking a huge hit, more so than some of our competitors. And when I say competitors, I mean entire sectors, so flower and whatever else. We really are fighting against a bad reputation in the past for just a product that wasn't very pleasant tasting. So we were killing it at events. Do you know what I mean? People were getting to taste all the new beverages. and see that it's actually delicious now. We've microdosed it. We're all playing around with our potencies in that category to see what works best, what doesn't. You know, there are a lot of challenges, and distribution. That's, you know, I think, you know, both Max and James touched on the biggest problem is they're used to pushing around a pound of weed, where a case of wine is much heavier. It's got to be handled differently. And literally the largest distribution companies in the business who we're friends with have declined even working with us because their handlers or just their logistics weren't set up for it. And they were setting themselves up for failure if they would have tried to push along. So it's been really difficult as a beverage, at least for us. And the type of bottle that we have and what it requires has been extremely challenging to get to market. However, you know, we are watching, there's at least 3 to 6 players, I would say, in the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months will now provide a competitive, maybe option to the one manufacturer that we have. So it'll be interesting to see as we continue to develop, and then will that contribute to whether or not we have more shelf space beyond the 1% we're even being considered, although we are watching it increase a little bit. So just there's a million and one challenges in our category, to say the least.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Go ahead, Luke. Sorry.
Piggyback on that. I mean, there's only one manufacturer that can do cans at scale in the state that's doing any volumes. And so, yeah, margins, what is that? But it's this weird cart before the horse type of thing that's going to keep lurching, since you need the category to perform well in order for more investment to be made in upstream manufacturing and distribution capabilities. But you need more brands in each segment of the category. You need 20 different types of wine alikes, 20 different types of beer substitutes, 20 different types of White Claw substitutes in order for the category to do well. It's funny, you go to even the dispensaries that have invested the most in beverage, you've got these big fridges, but there's like 3 or 4 brands spanning many dosage ranges, spanning many category types. And it's like if you went into Erewhon and you went to go buy oat milk and it was just one brand of oat milk and then one brand of regular milk, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to this is not a good consumer purchasing experience. So it really does take a leap of faith on the retailer's side. And in order for that to happen, it takes people like us, you know, brands that are premium branded, products that taste good, that deliver on the customer promise, to work together and really drive that performance in each of our subsegments in order for anybody to make the investments to get scale production and distribution vehicles and route optimization to work for the overall industry.
Well, I'd love to kind of move to the next side of the industry, which is retail, and maybe have Max talk a little bit about this too, kind of what you're seeing in the dispensary channel. You know, kind of obviously with COVID, delivery has been huge. You know, has that, you know, made some more space for cannabis beverages? And then maybe talk a little bit about the on-premises sector, and kind of what we see for events and cannabis lounges.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I see this as, you know, basically 2 distinct audiences, right? You have the enthusiasts, right, which is all about kind of price per milligram, really have to convince them that it's an interesting category. And then you have the more canna curious, right, which is what, you know, Cynthia, James, and Luke are really going after, right? So at the dispensary level, at least brick and mortar, a lot of these kind of legacy brick and mortars were built for the enthusiasts. So for me, it's how do you get the bud tenders to really start to adopt the category? And, you know, I think if you think about the retail market in general and access, what I'm really kind of honing in on and interested in is this on-site kind of consumption idea, maybe geared more towards beverage. Anecdotally, some brands that I've talked to that, you know, were selling through the Lowell's Cafe saw pull through at much greater rates than they did at their, you know, kind of brick and mortar partners. So would definitely be curious to hear everyone else's thoughts on the consumption side of this thing and where do we think that's going. for me, coming from alcohol, like when I go to a bar, it's like a very bespoke experience. You have a bartender that's concocting this delicious cocktail, but you know, how the regs are currently written, I'm not sure if that's even possible within the consumption category. And if not, what do we need to do from a lobbying standpoint to maybe get another type of, you know, license, so maybe a on-site or on beverage license for consumption. So anyway, that's something that I'm interested in and looking at more deeply.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was interesting. I listened to the Cannabis Advisory Committee meeting last week, and there was discussion around, you know, a lounge license. There was discussion around retailers being able to sell products other than cannabis, and both you know, suggestions were voted down by the committee. So, you know, that shocked me. I was like, well, obviously we need more retail outlets. We need more license types, you know, just judging from the other industry I work with, you know, the collapse of bars during COVID has been, I mean, I can't even express how devastating it has been for so many companies who are used to that, you know, ability to interact, that trial, the, you know, bartenders being able to suggest different new products. And obviously bud tenders, you know, do a lot of that. But I think to your point, Max, you know, they often tend to be more the super users, you know, not necessarily that, you know, kind of curious market experts. So yeah, I'd love to hear from the others, kind of, you know, how that on-premises environment is important to you, and what you think the future looks like.
Yeah, I am very, very conflicted about on-premise. We had an experience at OG Cannabis Cafe, FKA Lowell, and initially we saw fairly good pull-through, although it never even cracked, you know, our top quartile of retail accounts. And when I brought 6 really good friends, very loyal Cann fans, loved the product, and they sat down and they enjoyed the experience, I hate to say it, there is something about the traditional ways of consuming that a super user engages in an on-premise consumption setting that can be stigmatizing for somebody that had PTSD from a bad cannabis experience and is just getting used to it again. And so I really love this idea of there being on-premise consumption licenses that are limited in dosage per unit. Maybe it's just, you know, 10 milligrams and below per serving, and they're serving socially approachable doses for people that are trying to just get used to cannabis. I say this all the time across whatever industry you're in. People don't like feeling stupid, and people don't like not knowing what is happening around them. And there is this massive education gap from people who are so used to things like terpenes and milligrams and cannabinoids and dosages that reach incredibly high quantities. And if we don't lay the right breadcrumbs to make comfortable experiences for people that are newer, it can be, I think, really challenging for the entire industry to grow. The best consumers of Cann, Saka, and Cannacraft have still never gone to a dispensary today. And it's about finding ways to meet them where they're at and welcome them in and make sure they stay here.
Well, and I think it also goes to the public health opposition to a lot of these, you know, consumption lounges. You know, there is this concern, whether it's valid or not, I think is, you know, highly questionable about, you know, people driving, you know, and getting, creating a public health and public safety issue. So I think that's a really interesting idea, kind of limiting the, you know, categories that could be consumed, and kind of having like a trial space.
Yeah, one of our core tenets at the beginning of the year, in lieu necessarily of so many consumption lounges, was being active at events for that brand awareness. Being active at events that had on-site consumption lounges. Outside Lands last year in San Francisco was a perfect example of that, where they finally allowed, you know, consumption to be consumed and purchased on-site. So you don't have the full, breadth of outside lands coming through, but we were able to get bottles into so many hands at a very discounted price, just so you can get people, Luke, like you said, meet people where they are, in that experiential space. We've leaned so heavily into that for Absolute Extracts. We'll sponsor comedy shows, disc golf tournaments, things that are outside of the traditional cannabis space. They might not have consumption licenses tied onto them, but where you're meeting these new brand potential adopters. Events were such a huge part of that for us. As far as the transition into this COVID times and leaning away from in-store adoption, kudos to all of the dispensaries that so quickly were able to set up online ordering, delivery. Those companies, those brands now that are figuring out, true direct to consumer. And so we're able to get, product to your door or through a delivery partner or a dispensary partner to your door, within a day or so.
I'm muted. Cynthia, I think you're trying to say something, but you're muted.
I was just going to build off of, or at least start with what he was saying with delivery. Delivery for Saka has been our best avenue sales channel. I think that is probably going to be a trend, in my opinion, for drinks overall. I don't know, it just tends to be a different consumer. I can't prove that yet. But to back it up a little bit, as far as consumption lounges, I think consumption lounges are the future and will be exactly what makes beverages specifically as popular as they will become eventually, in my opinion. I think that what we saw with OG cannabis cafes, it just wasn't done right. It was a bunch of cannabis people trying to run a restaurant. When I got there and found out there wasn't one person hired that ever worked in a restaurant, like, to me, that's a big red flag, and it proved to be exactly what we thought. But it was a good example of what basis we have and what not to do in some areas and what we can do. And I actually believe, like Luke was mentioning, that I think what the future might be is something a little more along the lines of just maybe edibles and drinks versus, being able to smoke in the same category, because it can be uncomfortable to be around a ton of smoke. It's just not going to be welcoming for someone like my dad, or, it's just literally going to be for the enthusiasts, and will probably be better fit in Los Angeles and maybe Nevada, like Las Vegas, versus in the middle of Ann Arbor. So I think we'll slowly start to evolve, but I think consumption lounges are key for our category.
On that topic of kind of, what makes sense in different markets, I'm curious, outside of California, what you guys think the beverage space is going to look like. Obviously, the Canadians have been, making a lot of investments in that space. Thinking about, different markets, can they do this better than we can? What do you guys think the differences are going to be in different states?
Go ahead, Cynthia.
No, go ahead.
Oh, shoot. I was just going to say, I think a lot of states are going to look to California to get it perfected and get it figured out in terms of production and distribution. We're the largest market in the United States. Beverage in Hifi Hops launched in Colorado, and it's just so different. We partnered with Keef Cola, and Keef has been in the game for a really long time and done so well in Colorado with their 10 milligram, with their 100 milligram doses. But the lift, the education around Hifi hops, Lagunitas, the name didn't have the same pull necessarily in Colorado as it does in California. And we are figuring out that production. I think, what we're going to do is really iron out everything here and then take that forward into other states. It's just surprising that the category performance doesn't necessarily match up state by state. Colorado doesn't seem to want anything to do with our CBD rich products right now. They just want THC and more. So getting everything buttoned down here, I think that'll make it a heck of a lot easier to go over state lines.
The good thing about beverages, our category, is I think we're going to be able to scale the easiest. Edibles arguably can scale as well, kind of like us, but our base product can be like scalable everywhere. I think the markets that I'm most excited about are going to be the East Coast markets eventually. So New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Florida, I don't know, man. That's going to remain a conservative scenario for a while. But I think, Nevada made the most sense for drinks after California up until COVID-19. And I just saw some data that, the Las Vegas market's actually doing really well considering, but once you remove people and guests and visitors from a market like that, I don't know, I can't personally feel comfortable about expanding into them anytime soon, but that's my take on that.
So new market expansion is really hard. If it's not abundantly clear, which probably is to most of you, it's basically like a CPG company moving from one country to the next. There's all the red tape. There's all of the consumer skepticism about a brand that just drops in and tries to assume that it will do well. And in traditional cannabis categories, there are a lot of horror stories that retailers in Nevada told us, like, don't be like this brand that just kind of assumed the brand would be strong and then dropped a bunch of product. It's this intensive boots on the ground, driving trial, sampling, ensuring that non-dose product is available at every point of sale that will make it go. But it's very costly. And it's, you're running up against a lot of political headwinds every time you do it. I really feel like every state is a golden opportunity because 21 out of 25 adult drinkers want to drink less alcohol. It is universal. It is all over the country. The thing that makes it easier and why I'm really bullish on the Midwest is if it's your first ever cannabis purchasing experience and you find yourself with a beverage like a Saka, a Hifi hops, a Cann, then you're unlikely to churn and be like, well, that was not for me. So, states like Illinois, where there are people just rushing to dispensaries for the first time, not embedded in cannabis consumption behaviors that are hard to break, that I think will be huge. But really, it could work anywhere, I think.
But really quick, let me just reiterate once again the infrastructure. So, like, if they can't bottle our product because nobody can afford the license combined with the warehouse combined with our specific equipment, it's just much more difficult. So expanding as a beverage is definitely even more crazy challenging as well, just like any other brand.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add to, because I did this in alcohol where I expanded too quickly into other markets, and this is just maybe like a brand thing, but when you expand into new markets, it's not just about having, the distribution there. It is about what Luke says, like, you need boots on the ground. You need to put resources into really attacking that market. And for me, I was like, oh, all these new markets want my booze. That's great. I'll sell it to Oklahoma. I'll sell it here. I'll sell it there. But if you don't have presence there, boots on the ground, then you're not going to see that kind of exponential scale and growth. So that's just something I'm bringing over from the old booze world.
No, I think that is entirely relevant, Max. And I'd actually love for you to talk a little bit more about that. We talked on our prep call about kind of what you're looking for a brand, and kind of, thinking about that partnership with distributors, whether it's in-state or out-of-state. What do you think that boots on the ground has to look like, in the cannabis market? What do you think is the most important thing that brands can do to kind of create that pull through?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy has always been, I learned this operating in alcohol where, the small and medium guys were set up for disappointment because, we had to sell our product to large distribution houses with massive sales teams, big portfolios. So, naturally my little brand got lost in the shuffle. I still had to pay my distribution business, 30 something %, but I still had to hire my own people, my own sales folks. I had to go hit the ground and really drive business. So, for me, when I'm looking at brands, and this is how we've set up the distribution business, is really partnering with the brands who see the value in having their own sales team and really going out and telling that story and closing that business. And then we're kind of the technology and logistics infrastructure to help amplify and scale that. But for me, and especially in the beverage category, right? It's like, and all the folks in the panel have done an incredible job, I think, talking directly to their consumer. In alcohol, it's like you sell it to the distribution business, they sell it to the salespeople, salespeople sell it to the buyers, and then it's like this game of telephone. But for the category to, I think, grow in a really meaningful way, you got to do what I think all these folks are doing, which is talking directly to the consumer, marketing to them, and having them come to a dispensary or a delivery service and say, I want this. So just kudos to everybody.
No, that's great. And I see the chat is actually going the direction that I wanted to go, because my next question was going to be, in thinking about distribution and product selection and challenges, have you guys thought about CBD beverages? How has that been factored into your calculations? Other cannabinoids, is it easier to do non-THC beverages, or does it carry the same challenges?
I have a lot of strong feelings about this. Yes, it's logistically easier. Yes, you could nationally distribute and get brand recognition, but will that help your THC brand? I don't think so. There's a reason there are very few hard seltzers that make non-hard versions of that seltzer for the same brand. Would you go buy White Claw, alcohol-free, or a brand is so difficult to build, and the more narrow and specific the use case of that brand's products, the better a chance it has of surviving. CBD does not get you high. THC is a mild intoxicant at these dosage levels. And even though, we were told no by 90 investors before we got our first yes, and all of them said, hey, we would do this if it was, CBD. We looked at each other and said, I don't think we want to confuse the Cann consumer. And I think that a lot of the CBD beverages that rose to popularity a couple of years ago, and I think are probably not doing as well as they thought they would, because of how crowded the category is, and because of, I think, a lot of concerns related to efficacy. I think it actually was latent curiosity about cannabis and people rushing in and saying, this is like diet THC. This is like a safer place to start. And I had a lot of friends tell me, well, I had like one CBD drink and I felt really high. And I was like, no, that's called a placebo effect. And you just looked at it and you saw cannabis and you thought, well, am I supposed to feel high? I really think that this rush towards CBD did a disservice to the growth of the THC category. But just like the .com bubble burst and, things figured itself out, still bullish on the long run. I just really think the two need to be split, and brands should stop straddling both.
Well, also there's completely different regulation for CBD. They have their own nightmare of an issue. You can't even, in the state of California, you really can't have it in food, I believe, or beverages, and same with New York. There's just weird, you still can't use really payment processing. So the benefits are not really all that great. They're there in theory, but he's right. You're confusing your consumers and it just gets weird. I don't know. Doesn't really make sense. You're either a CBD beverage or you're a THC beverage. I don't know if you want to branch out with the THC, but THC and CBD are very different.
Very different. And it was, even in our products that are a ratio of CBD to THC, THC is present. It is a California, cannabis regulated product. Luke, I love it. We don't want to confuse our end consumer. We have something that if people are leaning towards more CBD dominant, we have an option for them. But agreed, we'll stay out of the straight CBD space. We've got enough going on.
But mixing the two makes sense. Don't get me wrong. We've all, I believe we all have CBD in our drinks, but you got to have the THC. If not, are you really cannabis?
The entourage effect is real. I mean, I love the white label Hifi hops is one of my favorite drinks. If I'm ever looking to, enjoy a barbecue beer type experience, and still be able to talk to people throughout a 4-hour event and want to keep pace with them, drink 1, 2, 3, 4 drinks alongside people who are having 4 beers. 1 milligram of THC, that's plenty for a lot of us. And I think the fact that you have CBD in these drinks and maybe even a CBD dominant ratio, it can reduce the anxiety of a THC experience that some people who are newer to the category tend to have.
Yes. And it's not to say there are a lot of people that don't even have access to a THC option. So if a CBD only beverage, whatever, is your only access, and it does give you an intended benefit, like absolutely. But we believe in the entourage effect, and that the THC does help activate it, and that's why we make it the way we make it.
I appreciate that. I'm tired of CBD beverages personally, and I hate advising people legally about CBD because it's such a gray area and there's no enforcement. So that's been probably the least favorite part of my practice is CBD projects. So I'd love to, I think we're sort of wrapping up here, but I'd love to, hear a little bit about, kind of where you see this category going. And I want to start with Luke. There's been some discussion in the chat about your roadie product, and wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about that and kind of what the rationale is for that product.
Yeah, it's funny. So these are the roadies. It is a box of 10 little packets. A lot of people think they're powder, but it's actually liquid. And we use these as an answer to consumers who said, I love Cann, but sometimes I can't carry, a big bulky, on a camping trip. I hate that I'm saying this on a recorded thing, but like on an airplane, I really like putting this into a seltzer, and I hope no one gets me in trouble. But it's also proven to be a really interesting way to acquire customers and to turn retailers who are like, it's heavy, it's bulky, dollar per milligram, it doesn't make sense. If you can offer 10 of these for, I think we're selling them for $18 at retail, dollar per milligram, it actually is competing with some of the lower dose edibles that sell really well. And when you have individual packs that are CR, which we're working on, you can imagine just a display right by the register, $2 at retail for one packet. That's one of the least expensive cannabis SKUs that you could have. And while we're all still fighting this brand awareness, consumer trial uphill battle, it's about making things, CR is child resistant. It's about making things that are more approachable and easier and still give someone a good experience. We were really worried that it was going to make for a substandard Cann experience because we like drinking ready to drink beverages. I like drinking my Spindrift. If you gave me a lemon juice packet to squirt into a LaCroix, I don't think I would do it as much. But there's something about mixology that's interesting in this category. And what we found with people who love the roadies is that they are just making their own cocktails with them. So, tearing 3 open if you want a 6 milligram drink in a big cup. And some people are even pouring them on top of alcoholic beverages as a floater and say it helps them drink fewer vodka sodas because it's a combined buzz. Again, we are not as a brand allowed to advocate for that, but people are doing what they want to do.
I'd throw those in LaCroix, and I'm a huge fan. I thought the world was going to implode when I put one into a LaCroix, but it did really well.
I feel like LaCroix should be a sponsor of this webinar. We've mentioned them a lot, but I think it shows to the strength of the category. Cynthia, I think you're on mute. Oh, now you're muted again.
No, I'm muted. Yep. I'm off now, right? I was talking about LaCroix. People have held them up. LaCroix's done great today in this panel. The future, what was the question again? I'm sorry. The future of our brands or the future of the category? Or both?
Yeah, either or.
The future of the category, I think we're just going to keep expanding. Over the next year or two, I see infrastructures being created in at least 3 to 5 states that make it realistic for people to actually expand comfortably with all types of categories within beverage. For our brand, we're getting ready to come out with our single serve, which solves a lot of interesting little issues that we have, having the full 750 liter multiple, use type of product. I don't know. We're excited about the future. One of the weird bittersweets about a pandemic, as awful and horrifying that it is, drinks and edibles, specifically the entire category, has increased in, desirability. So we don't see that stopping. If anything, it's just going to continue to grow. So that's it. That's what I see.
Awesome. James, Max?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to continue to see the evolution of the lower dosage consumer coming in. We're seeing that trend right now. It's happening. I think we're also going to see some mid to high range trends as well. That 25 milligrams of THC. That's still such a strong consumer in the space. As far as what we can expect to see from beverages, I think it's always smart to just look at the traditional beverage category. What's trending? It's been cold brew coffee, it's been kombucha, it's been yerba mate. At some point, it was pomegranate juice. Paying attention to the trends there is really, really going to help inform what the consumers are looking for in the future state of this beverage space. Something that I personally hope happens, I hope we get to a point where we do really get some quality House of Saka type non-alc options. I would love, Lagunitas is releasing IPNA, non-alcoholic, and it's delicious. Something like that, legally and compliantly, that we can get into the space that is consistent and delicious, will take it to the next level.
Yeah, I'm excited to see just more, I guess, like functional blends, like curated highs. Some brands are introducing like Delta 8 and Delta 9 to mimic certain types of highs. So I'd be curious to see kind of how those get implemented. Obviously incorporating terpenes, that seems to be more on the rise here. So those are the things I'm looking out for.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Am I right on time, Aria? I think so.
Yeah, you have a few, like 3 minutes left if you all want.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this was really great. I just want to thank all my panelists. If there are any questions from the chat that anyone wants to pop off at the end here. Otherwise, thank you all for joining us on a Sunday. I tried to keep it light on legal stuff since it is Sunday. And really focus on the fun parts of the beverage industry. Ooh, a juice bar. Yeah. Yeah. So many fun ideas from this group, full of hospitality folks. So love it. And yeah, I guess we'll end there. Thank you all for coming and joining us on a Sunday.